What up, YouTube? This is Steven, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I just want to talk about something that I've noticed from time to time, and some other people may have noticed as well. And where I'm coming from with this topic is, like, a lot of times when we talk about colorism, some people will throw out, like, oh, basically colorism is a ugly, dark-skinned woman's argument, right? In that dark-skinned women who look good don't really have any issues with colorism, which of course we know that's not true, right? There's been, plenty of dark-skinned women who are considered good-looking who have had trouble with, accepting the color of their skin, or perhaps the treatment that they received because of the color of their skin, etc., right? And I think YouTube user Chrissy did a video about this as well, where she read some quotes from dark-skinned women in the media who are considered good-looking, and quotes about them talking about colorism and their experiences as a darker-skinned woman in and outside of the community. But where I'm coming from with this video is, well, since colorism is a dark-skinned woman's argument, as some people like to put it, right? Could we say that maybe some lighter-skinned women as well maybe cling to colorism, because it does give them privileges and advantages in many situations, especially when it comes to, selecting men, right? A lot of times, as quiet as it's kept, lighter-skinned women tend to get the better pick of men. When a lot of times these black men, especially these dark-skinned black men, come up, they get some money. A lot of people say, like, the more the more money and the more successful a black man gets, the lighter his woman gets, right? Y'all heard that before? But yeah, like, seemingly lighter-skinned women get the best pick of black men, seemingly, at least. I may be wrong, but that's the way it seems to be, right? But the thing is, like, the media will have you thinking that every light-skinned woman is just, drop-dead gorgeous, like, walking around looking like Beyonce or Rihanna, or Halle Berry, or well, I don't even think she considers herself black. I was gonna say Amber Rose, but she jumps in and out of blackness when it's convenient. Now that's some half-breed shit right there. That's what I would call a half-breed, right? When you do that, you become a half-breed, right? When you just want to jump in when it's convenient, and then jump out of blackness when it's not convenient, and try to just, yeah. Another story for another day. Let's get back to this. But yeah, you'll think that the media will have you thinking that all light-skinned women look like them, but we know that's not true. We know that's not true. There are basic light-skinned women, and there are, busted light-skinned women. Let's keep it real. There's basic and busted light-skinned, or, basic and busted people from all sides, right? But the way that we get, because of the media, they'll have you thinking that, again, like, all these light-skinned women walking around looking like Rihanna or Beyonce or something. But that's not true. And notice it, like, when you're out and about in the community, in your community, look at the light-skinned women that are in your community. Are they, like, drop-dead gorgeous supermodel types, or, some video model types? No. They're probably, average, basic. But the thing is, colorism gives them an edge over darker skinned women, because colorism perpetuates the idea that you know, because of the lighter skin, they're more feminine and thus more sexy, beautiful, and more desirable because of that. Again, the colorism thing, right? Because in the community, we often associate darker skin with masculinity and lighter skin with femininity, right? That's kind of like our messed up mindset in the community, even though we know that that's not necessarily true. But that's the thing, because it's promoted like that. Every time you see like, dark skin and, um, you know, strong facial features, they're on a dark skinned man, right? That perpetuates the idea. And oftentimes when you see lighter skin, right, finer features, quote unquote, thinner features, they're on a light skinned woman, right? So we're perpetuating that again and again, and folks, you know, gravitate towards what the media puts in front of them a lot of times. Let's keep it real. I mean, I know we all got our minds, but some of us don't want to use our minds. Some of us just go with whatever the media tells us. I mean, at one point, the media was telling us that light-skinned dudes were the dudes back in the 80s, right? But it switched. Now the media is telling us that the dark-skinned dudes are the dudes, right? So you see how folks can be swayed by the media? But the thing is, that didn't happen with dark-skinned women and light-skinned women, at least not yet. They have been the choice seemingly since forever, for a while, right? Why is that though? Why didn't that happen? And I kind of, when it comes to colorism, I know that light-skinned folks, especially light-skinned women, do play a part in colorism. But when it comes to like light-skinned women and them perpetuating colorism, they have a strong ally that helps them perpetuate this and who supports them. And that strong ally is dark-skinned men. And to a much lesser extent, dark-skinned women do kind of help perpetuate colorism when it comes to light-skinned women. They, to a lesser extent, though, because sometimes some dark-skinned women want to live vicariously through lighter-skinned women, and there's reasons why that is, of course. And sometimes when lighter-skinned women who are biracial want to claim to be biracial, right? Sometimes the darker-skinned women will argue them down and say like, "No, you're black." Or I know there was this post on like Media Takeout. It was a while ago, like years ago, but it was like showing pictures of Leona Lewis and Halle Berry on the red carpet, and of course they're both biracial. And the article listed them both as biracial, and like a lot of black women in the comments section were really upset about that. They were going crazy over that. I'm like, well, I guess they are biracial. But then there's like, why they're black? And then when like this white basketball player married this biracial woman who may identify as black or she's part black, they had like listed her, or people were referring to her as biracial, and then they were like there were some black women in the comment section arguing them down, saying like, no, she's black, and he doesn't see her as a biracial, he sees her as black, right? So I will acknowledge that. But let's go back to dark-skinned men, right? Because a lot of times I feel like they play a part in this, and a lot of times people don't call this out for some reason. Either because we just got the smoke screen in our eyes, or we're just afraid, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, like a part of the reason why these lighter skinned women cling on to colorism is because of them darker skinned men, because of the way that they're treated by them, right? They're put on a pedestal because they're light skinned. They don't even have to be all that. Just being light skinned is enough, right? And of course, what woman is going to want to give up being put on a pedestal? What person is going to want to give up being put on a pedestal, especially a woman? Come on. So these dark skinned dudes, because they want to lick these light skinned women's butts, apparently, um, just continue to put them on a pedestal, right? They want them to have their kids, they want them to sleep with them, they want them to marry them, like, all this, that, and the third, right? And, the lighter skinned woman wants to be considered black, and sometimes she has issues with folks questioning her blackness, so she's got to get a dark skinned man to compensate for her lack of blackness, right? To make up for her lack of blackness, to apologize for it, right? Um, so I think that's part of the reason why some light-skinned women may claim to colorism, right? Because they are, without it, they would be they're basic with it, but without it, they would be super basic, right? So why would they want to give up something that helps them and that's something that they need? Same thing with white people and white supremacy, right? If you take away white supremacy from the equation, the mass majority of these white people would be extremely basic, right? If things were on a truly level playing field, yes, they would be, right? Like, we have been able to succeed and have some success in spite of all that's been placed in front of us, right? And a lot of times, I think when I see homeless white men, I'm like, how that happen? Like, this whole system is pretty much set up for you. Now, let's be real. So how that happen? But another story for another day, right? Um, but yeah, I think that in this particular situation, I think we can discuss darker skinned men, right? It's a call out. I guess we can say that. Um, but but a, a good question to ask is, why would these dark skinned men want to put these women on a pedestal who don't exactly look like them, right? They're considered part of the same social group, but they're not exactly the most reflective of them, right? Darker skinned women would be the most reflective of them. So why would these men want to put these lighter skinned women on this pedestal? Put them in the music videos, put them in the movies, the television, the magazines, etc., the media, right? Why? That's a good why. That's the question. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get an honest answer, but I can speculate as to why that is, right? And I think that hmm, it may kind of like, I guess, trace back to maybe like being color struck, perhaps. Um, some people may say they may have an issue with themselves. Other people may say they may have an issue with darker skinned women. Well, some people may say, well, if you have an issue with darker skinned women and you're a darker skinned man, then you have an issue with yourself. It can be very layered, right? Um, but partially, I think the media is to blame. Of course, there's a lot more places, people, and things to blame, but the media, because I think a lot of times when you do see darker skinned men in the media, they're paired with a lighter skinned woman, you know? And oftentimes when they are, you know, if they're not with a non black woman, then oftentimes it's like the woman is maybe black, but she may oftentimes be light skinned, right? And you're seeing that, and if you're a dark skinned man, you may think that, well, maybe you're supposed to be paired with a light skinned woman, right? You know? As well, perhaps some dark skinned men have gone through some, you know, like traumatic experiences as children, A lot of times, Like darker skinned men are a bit, they're not like darker skinned women in the sense that they're not speaking up on their plight, right? Because I think it's different when it comes to men. I think when it comes to women, women can be a bit more open about, their plight and the things that they go through. But then when it comes to men, especially black men, since black men are so often attacked, it's like you can't really be vulnerable, because we have to kind of read between the lines when it comes to darker skinned men, right? And of course, I mentioned, a couple of situations that, when I was talking to dark skinned black men, they kind of hinted at it, but they never went in depth with it, right? About kind of like maybe like the struggle or the issues or the things that they may go through, right? And still, I'm kind of like I'm ignorant to the struggles of darker skinned people in general. You know, I'm like if you were to tell me something, I probably would be surprised by it, honestly. Especially if it was a dark skinned man, I would be surprised. Like, oh wow, I didn't even know that was an issue for you. If it was a darker skinned woman, I probably wouldn't be as surprised. But if it was a dark skinned man, I would be surprised because dark skinned men are kind of seen as like really strong men, right? And they have to be, right? Even though I can make the argument that because a lot of times when this comes up, it's like, oh, the light skinned men are often like stereotyped as being like emotional and weak, like, but really, if you analyze the situation, I think a lot of times you could say the same thing about dark skinned men in some of these situations. I mean, for example, the whole what happened recently with Cameron from the WWE. A lot of dark-skinned men, especially, were in the comments section making a fuss over her preference. Right? We all can have preferences, except for when the preference isn't dark-skinned men. But if the preference isn't dark-skinned women, that's cool. But if it's not dark-skinned men, that's an issue. We got to call that out. All right. And like I was saying, black women, especially dark-skinned black women, you just need to sit back with some popcorn, perhaps a cup of tea, and just chill, relax, and watch things go down. Don't go caping for these. Don't go. Don't go with your cape there. These dudes don't need. These dudes don't deserve your cape right now. Save your cape for the dudes who do deserve it, but not these dudes. But yeah, but the thing is, like, if we saw this, like, if she says she didn't like light skinned dudes, there would be some light skinned dudes, a few, probably feeling a little salty about that. But then again, it's like, we've heard this before. This ain't nothing new. This is not nothing new. If you are a black man, a light skinned black man living in the community, are in the community, are a part of the community, it's nothing new. If Cameron would have said, "Oh, I like dark skinned men. I prefer dark skinned men over light skinned men. Yeah, I don't like light skinned dudes. They come off like, they weak. They too pretty for me." All right. Like, I know, of course, there would have been some salty light skinned dudes, but ultimately, it would have just been another day. And then the dark skinned dudes would have just been like, whatever. They wouldn't have cared, right? They wouldn't have cared. And really, when it comes to the lighter skinned dudes, I feel like ultimately they do take a lot, tolerate a lot, right? Because a lot of times the women say their little, have their preferences, right? And sometimes say little slick things, but also the darker skinned dudes say some slick things too. And ultimately, I think light skinned men have been good sports about this, right? I don't think, for the most part, light skinned men haven't really went in on any particular group of people, have done anything negative or nasty towards a particular group. They're just like, okay, that's your preference. All right, you know, all right. You wanna post light skinned dude memes? You do that, all right. But let's flip it around a little bit. Let's say if you know how the dark skinned dudes sometimes say like really fucked up shit about dark skinned women. Let's say if this had been a dark skinned, well, let's say if this had been a light skinned man saying saying the same things that these dark skinned dudes say about dark skinned women, right? Like, oh, that bitch look better red, or oh, these dark skinned hoes got bad credit, or oh, lighter skinned women make better babies, or really messed up shit like that, right? Let's imagine that for a second. Let's imagine if like Chris Brown or Drake or J. Cole, Colin Kaepernick, Jesse Williams, Shamar Moore, what's the dude name? Michael Ealy, um, etc. Right? Let's imagine if all of them just said, posted some little tweet, you know, on the internet about some little slick thing about dark skinned chicks. How do you think the community would react? Be real. How do you think they would react? I really think the reaction would be a lot stronger if those men I just listed were to say some slick things, some really derogatory things about dark skinned women. I really think the reaction would be like really strong. And it would come from both dark skinned women, but also dark skinned men too would probably jump in the mix too. Right? For some, I think they would. When it comes to a light skinned dude and like wanting to you know check a light skinned dude, or um put hands on them, or having a reason to have an issue with them, they'll jump in for that, right? you know of course this does not apply to all, right? Some is implied, right? Some, not all. I'm just saying. But yeah, like if those guys said those things about dark skinned women, the community would not tolerate that. Those guys would be dragged and possibly even like, you know, purged from the community to an extent. But when it comes to darker skinned men, I think it's almost like it happens so much that it's just like another one. It's not even a big deal anymore. Like another. Okay. Yet another dark skinned dude saying some crappy, messed up shit about dark skinned women. Like we not even it's not like a big surprise as much. But like again, if Drake had posted this, like, oh, these dark skinned hoes need to tighten up. You know how many people would come for Drake if he said some mess like that? Or like, Chris Brown said, oh, these like these dark skinned hoes, I swear they got the worst credit. You know, these dark skinned women, I swear. Like just some messed up shit. Like I swear these dark skinned women would look much better red. Right? Like, how do you think people would react to that? Especially coming from those men. They would react strongly to that. But why? I really think they would. I just don't imagine the community just letting that slide. I don't. I really don't. But the thing is, I feel like in those situations, dark skinned men and dark skinned women, and maybe even some light skinned women, would jump all over them and like just like drag them and snatch them up and get them straight real quick. But if if a light skinned woman were to say these things about a dark skinned woman, I feel like the dark skinned women would come for her, but I feel like the dark skinned men and even the light skinned men to an extent would be like, oh, for some reason, you know, Well, I'm not sure why. It seemed like the reaction would be stronger for the dude perpetuating colorism, but versus the woman, the light-skinned dude perpetuating colorism versus the light-skinned woman perpetuating colorism. And I guess maybe that has to do with positionality in society, I guess. Like, maybe they feel like the light-skinned dude may perhaps be in a more better position to perpetuate negativity or negative stereo or negative or negativity and colorism, perhaps. I guess it's sort of similar to how people react to racism coming from white men versus racism coming from white women. Sometimes some like white women sort of can slip by and get a pass on some things that they say that's fucked up. But when it comes to like white men, like people will go in on the white men though. But I think that's because partially because I feel like the positionality of white men as being on the top of society, as well as being in a position to perpetuate fucked up shit. Because historically they have perpetuated fucked up shit. So yeah, so I think that may kind of like perhaps be sort of similar to how people view lighter skinned men for some reason, even though I don't know. I don't think light skinned men are really in a position. I think darker skinned men are more in a position, really. But maybe I'm missing something. Um, I'm pretty sure I got off a topic. I always do that because this thing is it's just so much. I tell you, one topic leads into the next topic. But I guess to sum it up, people say that colorism is a ugly dark skinned woman's argument. Well, can we say that basic light skinned women claim to colorism? I could say that's an argument. I think there are a lot of basic light skinned women will defend colorism for some reason. Well, we know the reason because they basic and they don't want to give it up, right? Because look about it. Notice the women, because I think like the more, if you look in the media and the women who have owned up and talked about colorism, like a lot of them are more so like the more exceptional kind. Like say Zendaya Coleman, perhaps. Um, let's see. Um, who else has, perhaps Soledad O'Brien, right? The more exceptional, right? Who else has owned up to colorism in the media? I want to say Beyonce, but I haven't really heard her say anything about colorism. Uh, I think she's aware of it though, but I don't think she's ever spoken about it publicly though. And as well, I think colorism, as Chrissy said, when it comes to light-skinned women who may not, who may deny colorism, I think it does hit them. It comes back to them. It does when they want to perpetuate that BS, and it comes back to them through their daughters because they wind up having daughters with these dark-skinned men, and sometimes the daughters come out dark-skinned. So then they are kind of like in a position where they can't quite deny colorism anymore since it is affecting their child now, especially their daughters. So I think that is sort of like karma coming back to them, like, oh yeah, since you want to be fucked up and say and perpetuate fucked up shit, okay, let's throw this back at you. Let's put this back in your household. Let's put your child through this, right? So now you cannot deny it anymore unless you just are just a terrible parent, right? But yeah, it becomes real. Like Chrissy had mentioned that, but yeah, it does become real when you have a dark-skinned child, right? And you may start to notice how your child is treated in society, right? Especially when they have a lighter skin sibling versus a darker skinned sibling, and you may see how there's differences in the way that they're treated, you know. But yep, I guess I've said all I have to say for the moment. So thanks a lot for watching, you guys. Feel free to comment, feel free to subscribe, feel free to give me a thumbs up. Your feedback and support are extremely appreciated and extremely valued. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.